Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. Live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Wednesday, October 3rd, 2018. Kevin Laramee, that's me. Joining me on the line, on location today, Duane Rollins. Duane, how you doing today?
It's all good. All good. David Silva rescued the day, so it's all is happy.
Jeez, that was close. Offenheim, you know, they did it to Pep Guardiola once before. In the Bundesliga a few years ago, they scored the quickest goal in Bundesliga history, 7 seconds into a game, against Bayern Munich. And I guess they have figured out one way to score quickly against Pep Guardiola's tactics, and it happened again. Hoffenheim opens the game with a goal in the first few minutes of the game versus Man City.
For the first minute of the game, I think it was 50 seconds in. Yeah, it was a bit of a shock start for sure. Look, City in the Champions League, it's a confounding thing sometimes. But after that goal happened, and Aguero got it back in the 8th minute, so not very long after they got it, they drew it even. And it was a pretty controlled performance by City after that, but it took forever to break them down, and that is something that they're going to have to address if they truly want to go deep in this competition. But Hoffenheim, full marks for getting off to the good start, but the commentators were saying that maybe they scored too early. I don't know about that, but it certainly was a shock.
They peaked too early in the game itself. that could have been a reason. Man City came back, and it wasn't easy. It took the whole entire game to get the game winner. But Man City 2, Offenheim 1. So that was a good result on the road. And mixed with the Lyon-Shakhtar Donetsk draw, now City finds themselves only 1 point behind Lyon in top of the group, and things are back to being hopeful.
Yeah, win the reverse leg against Lyon and all is fine, right? Like, I mean, you can afford one slip up in the Champions League group stage. You can't afford two, and for a long time it looked like maybe they might be quite a bit back, but they got the job done, and hopefully they can build into this big game for them in the weekend too. I don't know whether maybe they had one eye on that or something. It was kind of, like I said, I tweeted out I'd seen this movie before. They just weren't able to break them down. But the magic of Silva. Silva's he just keeps going. What a great player he's been for City and the world really for the last decade or so. And he doesn't seem to be slowing down. Doesn't seem to get any worse. He still can produce magic out there.
Well, I guess it's because he shaved his head, so he's a bit more aerodynamic now. I don't know. Yeah, he looks so older.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe there's something about shaving your head. We should ask you. Right. Continuing with the scores yesterday. Juventus versus Young Boys. The Paulo Dybala show. Yes, Ronaldo was suspended for this game for his red card that he received in the first game. Speaking of red cards, Young Boys got one in that game too. And Juventus and Paulo Dybala, 3. Young Boys, 0. Juventus, probably one of the good teams, if not maybe the best team in the Champions League so far.
And already 6 points up in Serie A. It's a pretty dominant performance by Juve, and their ability to run away with that league sort of allows them to completely focus on the Champions League. It is obviously their goal this year. It is their own, well, it's not their only goal. They want to win Serie A clearly, but that seems to be something that's just going to happen by default almost. So
a goal or a inevitable event that's going to occur. Like those are two different things. And Juventus winning Serie A is an inevitable event that's going to occur.
Yeah, PSG and France as well, but and probably Bayern Munich. Although there's a race in Germany right now, we'll see how that goes. But certainly, we talked about this, I guess, problem in terms of the dominant teams in the European leagues, and that's why the Champions League becomes so important for them. But I don't know what really Young Boys has. It's their first time back in a while. Didn't offer a lot against United. Didn't offer a lot against Juve. They look like they're out of class right now. So you can't read too much into that, other than the fact that Juve just keeps rolling.
If you're not going to say it, I will. Well, they look like boys against men. All right, moving on. Ajax versus Benfica. Benfica on the road going to Athens to play in Greece. Benfica gets the red card, but it doesn't matter. They get the result. 3-2. Benfica as well, wanting to stay in the Champions League after the group stages. It's like young boys. They're more known for their Europa League results over the last few years, though they did well last year, Benfica, to be quite honest. So Benfica 3, Ajax 2.
Famously, Benfica hasn't won a European Cup since 1960, I believe, or something like that. There's a curse on that, and you can look that up if you're interested. But Benfica's been struggling a little bit too, so that was a well-needed win for them. The Greek teams don't generally provide much opposition in this thing, and that's another league that's a little bit one-sided sometimes. So, that probably is a battle for. I don't know what to make of Benfica, really. As I said, they're kind of struggling in the Portuguese league. Can sometimes jump up and provide some surprises in the Champions League, but I'm just not too sure if Benfica is going to be the team that does it this year. But a result on the road yesterday, so good for them.
And maybe the shock of the day in Moscow. CSKA Moscow facing a depleted Real Madrid, missing a lot of players. Bale, Modric, two of the big players they were missing. And Modric wasn't injured. There's a lot of injuries and players not informed that were playing for Lopetegui's Madrid. But Modric, it was a decision to just leave him out of this game and not overexert him. Looking at La Liga, thinking, well, it's CSKA Moscow. We'll walk all over them anyways. They did, but they conceded a goal, and they weren't able to score one. CSKA Moscow, with a red card, beats Real Madrid. That's a shocker. I hope you put some money on that one.
I did not. I don't know if Real Madrid's struggling, but they certainly aren't playing to their normal standards. But they kind of did this last year too at this time of year. So watch out for them in the money part of this tournament for sure. I mean, they obviously have the history to back that up. But Cisco's a tough trip. They're usually good for an upset there once a year, and this is it. This is a huge one for them. It's a famous day that they'll talk about for years probably. But it's tough to travel to Moscow. You never really want to draw the Russian teams. You should be able to get past them, but the travel's pretty hard, and and certainly they got the job done. So, again, I'm not Real Madrid. Remember, finished second in the group last year and won the competition. So that's not panic quite yet.
Yeah, no, panic is very far from happening for Madrid as we speak. Another, not necessarily an upset, but another great result for the traveling team. Ajax from the Netherlands from Amsterdam to be precise, traveling to Munich to face Bayern, and, well, they got the draw. They got a favorable result for them, 1-1. I guess Bayern really needs Davies, and they're just waiting for Alfonso, right? Right?
Oh, yeah, that's got to be it. Yeah, Bayern's struggling a little bit of late. Maybe that is an opportunity for Alfonso Davies, but we jest, obviously. We don't think that that's what they're waiting for here. But, great result. And it's a team that, as I said a minute ago, there's a bit of a race in the German league right now because Bayern hasn't been perfect, and that's a good thing. It is a team that I think needs to turn over a little bit. I mean, again, to go back to the Davies things, but just not despair. They are getting a little longer in the tooth for sure, and maybe this is an example of that, or it could just be a blip, right?
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of a blip, I guess it's not a blip anymore. 4 games in a row without a win. For Manchester United, for Jose Mourinho, even Paul Scholes is saying that, look, he's embarrassing himself, his mouth is running too much, and he's embarrassing the club. I'm surprised he made it through the weekend. Man United 0, Valencia 0, 0-0 on a European night at Old Trafford. You don't see that too often.
No, this is not your daddy's United, right? I mean, they continue to or Big Brothers or whatever you want to put on that for sure.
Older brother.
Look, we talked this to death. I don't really want to get into it again, but I mean, he's got to be up all the time at this point, unless it's the Blazers, they don't want to buy load. I don't know, but it's more than just there's some holes in that lineup too. So I don't know if you completely blame Mourinho, but it's clearly not working. Although there's no shame in drawing against the Spanish team, but even a Spanish team that's not the big two. But, yeah, that's not a result you'd expect. And 4 in a row, as you say, without a win is not something that you've seen very often when you're talking about Manchester United.
They say it's the worst beginning of the season, at least league-wise, for Man United since 1993, the first year of the Premier League. So that tells you all you need to know about the performance of Man United so far. Because, well, they had Louis van Gaal, they had David Moyes, and even those two had a better league at the beginning of the season than Mourinho. Moving to Lyon and Shakhtar Donetsk, we mentioned it earlier. Lyon, the shocker, at the Etihad in England, in Manchester a few weeks ago. Now at home versus Shakhtar Donetsk. Maybe we sold the Shakhtar Donetsk skin a bit too early. Lyon was able to only get a draw against Shakhtar Donetsk. Shakhtar Donetsk, the best team coming out of Ukraine year in, year out. And Lyon and Donetsk draw 2-2. That opens up the group a bit for the top, but second and third and fourth position might be interesting now with those results, because if you look at them, Hoffenheim, Lyon, and Shakhtar Donetsk, on any given day, any of those three teams, especially Lyon and Hoffenheim, can beat each other. So maybe City will rise to the top of that group before the end of the group stage, but the second and third spot, it might be quite a battle between Hoffenheim and Lyon.
No, well, for sure. It's a pretty even group outside the top eight. And that City-Lyon game was just bizarre when you think back on it. I mean, obviously City stumbled, not even stumbled yesterday. They sort of huffed and puffed and got it done. But there were so many mistakes they made in that Lyon game. And I didn't necessarily think that it was as much. Like, you don't want to not give credit to a team that finds a way to win. But that was definitely a case of a team finding a way to lose that first game to City and Lyon. So I'm not that shocked. The Shakhtar, which is a decent team, they're usually in a battle for second in the group stage. So not that shocking. And as you say, it was a good result for Manchester City. Although it took them a while to get there. I think now you have to put them back as favorites to win this group now again.
And the lopsided result of the day: Roma 5, Plzen 0. This one was never in doubt. Nothing really much to say about this one. So let's just preview today's game quickly. Before we move on, Duane has to leave early today, so I'll finish the show by myself talking about the news of the day. There's one news in particular that I really want to talk about. There's a player being linked with MLS, and I think that could be a good deal for anyone picking him up. PSG, Red Star Belgrade. Yeah, that one should be a lopsided one, too.
You'd think, yeah. I mean, it's good. Belgrade back in the Champions League. It's good for them, good for the fans. It's the type of game that they want to see, the reason you want to be in it. But yeah, they're a little overmatched there for sure.
Lokomotiv Moscow, Schalke. This one in Moscow, that could be interesting. Look, I always say this when we just talk about CSK Moscow, Lokomotiv Moscow. Those two clubs really show the divide of the Russian population in Moscow and in the region, especially. Lokomotiv is the players, is the people's team, is the team of the regular folks, the workers, the poor people, everyone have a better understanding and identification to this team. And CSK Moscow is the elites team in Moscow. So Lokomotiv versus Schalke, that's interesting. But the salivating match today, 3 p.m., Napoli versus Liverpool, that one should be a good one. Yeah, the entertaining soccer for sure. In that one, you would think Napoli can get out there and play when it wants to. And obviously, we've watched Liverpool. Liverpool's tough schedule right now. Obviously, they come off the back-to-back Chelsea games, and they play this game midweek and have to play City in the weekend. So this is one crazy sort of schedule that they're going through right now. Four games.
We'll see what kind of energy they have.
4 games in 14 days for Liverpool. If you go back to the League Cup, where they lost to Chelsea last Wednesday 4-3, then he won 1 versus Chelsea. Then you have this game today, and in the weekend they're playing a City. So 4 games in 14 days versus top opposition.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough run for them. If they can get through this, then you gotta give them credit if they can get through this. But this could be a fun one there for sure. Although Napoli's not quite at the height that they were a couple of years ago, I still would put Liverpool as the favorite in this one.
Yeah, there's no Higuain for Napoli, which really made a difference. When you had Amchek in the midfield and Napoli up top to finish the Amchek service, that was a big difference. There's Porto, Galatasaray, PSV, Eindhoven, Inter Milan. Dortmund, Monaco should be a good one. Atletico Madrid, Club Brugge. But the other salivating match, if you are inclined to like any of those two teams coming up, Tottenham Hotspurs at home versus Barcelona.
At Wembley. Yeah,
at
that's a fun
Wembley.
one for sure. And Barcelona is struggling a little bit too, so Spurs will like their chances, particularly on that big pitch. So that's the one to watch for sure, and it should be a lot of fun. And the Liverpool Napoli we mentioned too, but a lot of good games. Today was better than yesterday, I think, in terms of the matchup. So fun day of soccer ahead for everyone, and we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Fun day on DAZN if you are a subscriber. You know, I've been surprised of watching DAZN more than usually. Usually I just watch it for soccer, but last weekend there was some mixed martial art on there, and there was some other things. Like, oh yeah, there's other things in soccer. Anyways, Duane, any trouble with DAZN yesterday, or it was good for you?
Buffered a little bit.
Yeah,
I
me
watched
too.
it at Alfred Bob's. So, it wasn't perfect, and the bars are frustrated with it, and it's going to be a solution that we've talked about already that they're going to need to figure out by the time we get to the business end of the tournament. They're going to need to find a way to make these streams stable, or they might have some riots in their hand. But we watched it, we saw it, and away we go.
And we thank Duane for his time today. Duane has got to go today. I'll be right back after this break to talk about some news.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. I'm Kevin Laramee. You can follow me on social media at Kevin Laramee. You can follow Duane at 24th Minute and the show at Soccer Today SPN. The news I was teasing earlier in the show is, well, Radamel Falcao is linked to a move to Major League Soccer. He's got a contract through to the next season of the European season, 2019-2020. But there's a few teams that might be interested in Radamel Falcao, and hopefully Montreal is one of them. I don't know. I'm not in the know. I don't even think no one knows. But if you are a Major League Soccer team, Radamel Falcao could be a game changer in Major League Soccer. Just look over the last few years, the players that did come over, maybe late in their career. He's not that late. He's not a Drogba. He's not a Rooney. He's a bit younger, but has not as high of a pedigree, but he has skills, and he has an upside and a way of playing that could be very successful here in Major League Soccer. If I am Montreal, for example, and I need a striker going forward in the next few years, right now we all agree, if you're Montreal, that Quincy America is doing a fine job for now. Is he the man for the future? Is he the man for forever? That's still for debate. Mancosu is no. And Anthony Jackson-Hamel will probably be playing somewhere else in a very near future if a transfer fee or a move is agreed on by all sides. So, leaves you with a big spot in your lineup for a striker. And Radamel Falcao, for me, would be a great addition to any team in Major League Soccer, especially Montreal. Okay, moving on now. DC United's O'Neal Fisher to miss rest of the season with knee injury. He was subbed off the game against Montreal last weekend, Saturday, at Audi Field, and he's going to miss the rest of the season. Will it be enough to damper their chances to make the playoffs? I don't think so. He's not a player necessarily that was that important. He is an important player in the build-up of this team, but is he Acosta, which, by the way, was named Player of the Week for last week? Rooney finished second. DC dominating the votes here from the soccer reporters, which I'm part of. But O'Neal Fisher to miss the rest of the season with knee injury. Speaking of Falcao, there's apparently two clubs that are really interested with Radamel Falcao, and that's Inter Miami and Crew, the Columbus Crew. Or will it be Austin? I don't know. No one knows yet. We'll see if it happens. But the report, Falcao linked with Crew SC and Inter Milan. We'll see if it happens. Sporting Kansas City signed a 15-year-old, Tyler Freeman, as an homegrown player. One of the youngest signees in the history of Major League Soccer. Okay, he's not 13 like Freddie Adu was. But we'll see the way this unfolds. There's a few other good news coming up. Sporting Kansas City, they're looking to make an MLS Cup run, and they'll be there to follow it. Talking about The Athletic. The Athletic now are gearing up, at least in the American side. In Canada, they've reverted back to covering mostly hockey, especially here in Montreal. They've dropped their Alouettes coverage. They have dropped the Montreal Impact's coverage. And they're literally just focusing on hockey, French, and English. Outside of Montreal, you do have a lot more coverage of other sports than hockey, especially in Toronto, in the United States. But in Montreal, the Athletic has decided to drop everything outside of hockey, so that's interesting. But if you're in Kansas City and you want more coverage of your favorite soccer team, you can get it now on The Athletic with a subscription. So that's not too bad, if you are part of The Athletic. And well, even if you're outside and you have The Athletic subscription, even if you're in Montreal, for crying out loud, you can get coverage of other teams. Jeff Router, Joshua Cloak, Jeff Router out of Minnesota, friend of the show. Joshua Cloak in Toronto. We had him on the show too. So we'll see. Now, there's a FIFA course for VAR instructors, and there's the first one. And Mark Geiger, who is one of the most experienced video assisted referee out there. He did the World Cup, of course, famously, last summer in Russia. He was in the booth more often than not for the video-assisted referee, the instant replay. Mark Geiger will be attending and giving some instructions in that course for referees, for VAR instructors to build more VAR. And that's interesting, and that's fascinating. And we'll see if it changes anything on this side. You know, once you teach something, sometimes it makes it easier to understand it yourself. And I want to finish the show today by talking about a news coming out of Tampa Bay. We haven't really talked about the USL much lately. We did last week when they were showing their rebrand, so there's that. But Bill Edwards, famous owner of the Tampa Bay Rowdies, no more. He sold them to the Tampa Bay Rays, the baseball team. The ownership conglomerate of the Rays has bought the Tampa Bay Rowdies and the land and Allianz Stadium. That's a good news if you're USL, if you're the Rowdies fan. It probably solidifies their market going forward and their pockets. They have more money now than when they were under Bill Edwards. They were a bit in not financial trouble, but they had difficulty over the last few years at some point. So now that the Rowdies have been bought by the Rays, what's the ceiling? What's the idea? You remember the push St. Pete to MLS? Tampa Bay wanted to make a push for the expansion process last year, and they did. Earlier this year, actually, they did. They were trying to, weren't in the selected 4 cities to get an MLS concession. Now, Tampa Bay might want to go back and work on their stadium plans, work on deals and money, and now they have more money. We always talked about, when it was the expansion of Major League Soccer, that it's not just the plans you have, it's not just the stadium, the rendering, and it's not just about showing ambition. It's about showing that ambition through. It's about being able to prove that the ownership group is worth it and is worthy. And now it is. So, maybe in the near future, year or two, or maybe not, maybe they'll be content by being in the USL, the championship, which is going to be the top division of the USL. Then you have USL League 1, which will be USL D3. And then you have USL League 2, which will be the PDL of the USL. But with this transaction, the Tampa Bay Rays have their first foray in another sport outside of baseball. And we'll see. Let's just put it this way. Their baseball team was not necessarily run in the best of ways. So we'll see where that leads. The USL team, which could be interesting. There's a few international players that have been called up, and of course there's the Canadian national team who called up Samuel Piette from the Impact, and James Pantemis, which will be on the bench as a goalkeeper. Jukka Raitala from Montreal as well has been called up by the Finland national team. Josef Martinez has been called up by the Venezuela's national team. Union Moreno, Ronaldo Peña, and Rolf Fleischer of the Galaxy, Peña of Houston, Moreno of DC United, and Josef Martinez, of course, famously of Atlanta, your new goal-scoring record kingpin in one season. It's kind of funny how he's not destroying the record like we all thought he was. He got it, and then, well, okay, I can slow down, apparently, something like that. But yeah, those are a few players being named to their national team for the upcoming international break in the next couple of weeks. Canada will play Dominica in Toronto, their first home game in the Nations League qualifiers. And we'll talk more about this roster in the next Two Solitudes podcast, which we should find a way to record it probably tomorrow for patrons only. Patreon.com/sportspodcast network. $2 a month will give you access to the show. Thanks to the brand new subscribers from the last couple of days who took time to subscribe and pay $2 and get access to our archives of the Two Solitudes Soccer podcast and to the upcoming shows. I'm just going to take a second and mention them by name because I'm happy to have them on board. Thank you, Francis Labrie. Thank you, Jason Klassen. Thank you, Donald. Thank you, Blair Donnelly. Thank you as well to Fraser, Cameron, and much more. Thank you for your patronage. Your support is well appreciated, and we will give you a great Canadian soccer show. As always, thanks for listening to Soccer Today. You can find this show anywhere you get your podcasts. Just look for Soccer Today or the Sports Podcasting Network or SPN, and you'll find the link to this podcast. You can find this show as well on YouTube with our live little video in our studio. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/sports podcasting network. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Soccer Today, reviewing today's Champions League and continuing to talk about the world of football with a soccer perspective. And until then, as it is a tradition, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.